The camera was rolling. The girlfriend was 8 months along. And the man giving a real estate homily on live stream was sitting close enough to smell the perfume of a woman who, 6 weeks earlier, had confessed on her own phone that she'd been sleeping on a cot in a shelter for 2 whole months. Freeze that picture. Don't scroll past it. Don't blink past it. Don't try to reason with it yet. Because Blueface, Jonathan Porter, the same rapper who's been in and out of holding cells, in and out of custody battles, in and out of headlines that read like a probation officer's spreadsheet, logged into his stream on a Tuesday afternoon in July of 2026 and decided the hill he wanted to plant his flag on that day wasn't music. Wasn't fatherhood. Wasn't even the album he keeps promising the fans. It was floor plans. That's not a metaphor. That's the tape. Blueface, live on camera, ranking women by the square footage they can afford. And Nevaeh, sitting a shoulder width away, nodded along like the words weren't crawling straight toward her, too. Y'all, that whole segment turned into one of the strangest quarter-hour blocks of hip-hop adjacent television the summer has produced, and I have to break it down before something even louder drops by the weekend. Hit that like button. Subscribe. Tap the bell. Because this Blueface story is already branching into 4 different timelines and I'm going to walk every single branch with you. Grab a seat, settle in, and let me set the room temperature before we go one word deeper. This isn't a lawsuit. This isn't a police report. This is a live broadcast. A man on camera. A woman on camera. A chat feed sprinting past in real time. And an audience with the screenshot factory already open for business. Every word I'm about to walk you through is public. Every clip has a timestamp. Every quote is on tape. I didn't put a single syllable into anyone's mouth. I just slowed the footage down, laid the receipts in the order they actually happened, and asked the question nobody in the room had the nerve to whisper while the ring light was still hot. So if you feel yourself getting pulled in, that's the mechanic doing its job. That's how these rollouts run. They're engineered to feel like drama and to function like a commercial. Once you spot the shape, you can't unspot it. And by the time we wrap up here, you'll be catching the same pattern on 3 other feeds before the weekend closes. Here is what actually happened, timeline sharp. On his July 23, 2026 live broadcast, Blueface launched into a monologue about Chrisean Rock, and Jaidyn Alexis, and the apartments they've reportedly been living in. His exact words. Quote. Nobody living in an apartment can convince me their mentality's on my level. Close quote. And Nevaeh, his pregnant girlfriend, sitting right beside him, laughed. Nodded. Co-signed. Not a flinch. Not a pause. Not a, wait, babe, what? Minutes later, the chat surfaced the elephant that Blueface had somehow forgotten to notice. Nevaeh herself had been in a shelter for 2 months. She admitted it. Giggled through it. Then delivered the line that lit the internet on fire. Quote. At least I don't live with my mama. Close quote. A jab most of the timeline read as a direct swing at Chrisean Rock and her mother. That's the frame. Now let's crack the frame open, because the picture gets slipperier the longer you sit with it. Notice how the monologue didn't start as a housing take. According to viewers who watched the stream from open to close, it began as a lifestyle comparison. An I'm just built different moment that streamers cycle through twice a week. But somewhere between the 3rd and 4th sentence, the topic drifted. It stopped being about him and started being about them. The X's. Plural. And the second Blueface named the category, the chat did what the chat always does. It reverse-engineered which faces belonged in the category and which face was sitting right there on the couch. Within minutes, screenshots of Chrisean Rock's old lease chatter, Jaidyn Alexis's rental rumors, and Nevaeh's own shelter confirmation were being stapled together in the same Twitter thread. That's the part the clip aggregators sanitize before they post. The monologue didn't just spill out. The chat shaped it. Every emoji, every, wait, wasn't Nevaeh, reply, every timestamp screenshot was pouring fuel on the fire while the fire was still on air. According to viewers documenting the stream in real time on X, the shelter mention arrived less than 9 minutes after the apartment line. 9 minutes. That's the actual shelf life of a Blueface sermon before the receipts overtake it. 9 minutes is also, by the way, roughly the length of a standard reality TV cold open plus its first commercial break. Keep that number in your head. It's going to matter later. And here's the quieter storyline, the one that's been sitting in plain view without a single major outlet naming it. Nobody in the room paused. Not Blueface. Not Nevaeh. Not the moderator. Not the guest on the split screen. When the chat surfaced the shelter, the stream didn't stop. It swerved. It laughed. It kept rolling. That reflex, the refusal to break stride when a contradiction lands with that much weight, is the single loudest tell in this whole ecosystem that what you're watching isn't a slip. It's a scene. Real slips make people flinch. Scripted ones make people reach for a smoothie and change the subject. Real words. Real people. Real receipts. I'm not paraphrasing any of this. I want you to hear it exactly the way it came out of their mouths. From the stream, Blueface. Quote. If you live in an apartment, I'm not hearing you, because you haven't figured out how to climb out of that apartment yet. Close quote. That is the thesis. Frostbite cold. He also said, and I'm quoting directly, screw crib, that's going to tell me everything I need to know about you. Close quote. Fine. Moving on. Nevaeh, same stream. When the chat confronted her about the shelter, her defense was this. Quote. I was only in a shelter for 2 months and it was free. Close quote. Then she doubled down. Quote. I don't live with my mama. I haven't lived with my mama since I was 17 years old. Close quote. Reported and clipped by multiple gossip outlets within hours. Reaction. Half laugh. Half whiplash. Because, it was free, is not the flex she seems to think it is. Then there's the older receipt everyone has already scrolled past. Back in December of 2024, Blueface publicly announced that he had bought Jaidyn Alexis a 4-story house. He told the entire internet about it. New house for the fam. The elevator broke in the walkthrough. They filmed it laughing about it. XXL published the story. So the mother of his son, the very woman he's now indirectly dragging over her living conditions, was living in a house that Blueface himself handpicked. Odd angle to swing from. And on Chrisean Rock's side, reporting from late 2025 into early 2026 said she had temporarily moved her son into LaMelo Ball and Nikki Baby's mansion while she looked for stable housing. Daily Loud via X. Not an apartment. Not a shelter. A whole mansion. Borrowed, absolutely, but still. One more, because the context matters. Nevaeh has spent the last few months on the defensive over her own past. She went live to clarify she wasn't currently homeless after Jaidyn Alexis allegedly called her a homeless 304. Her own words, her own account. So the quote bank is loud. It's already loud. And we haven't even gotten to the part that changes the whole read. Now let's thread it together. Because when you stack the receipts chronologically instead of thematically, an entirely different portrait emerges. Read them in the order the words were actually spoken, not the order they trended. Blueface, December 2024, new house for the fam. That comes first. Then Jaidyn Alexis's alleged homeless 304 line aimed at Nevaeh. Then Nevaeh's live clarification defending herself. Then the July 23rd sermon. Then the shelter confirmation. Then, at least I don't live with my mama. That is a 19-month arc with the same 3 women, the same 1 man, and the roles keep swapping. Whoever's housed this month is the moral authority. Whoever's not is the target. It's not a feud. It's a rotation. Producers dream of rotations. Rotations mean seasons. Seasons mean checks. And there's a quieter quote that no highlight reel is bothering with. Blueface said on the same July 23rd broadcast, according to viewers who transcribed the segment, that, my girl doesn't need a job, she's got me. On the surface, a flex. Under a magnifying glass, an admission. Because in the very same breath that he's arguing apartment residents lack mentality, he's also arguing that his girlfriend's financial independence is his to grant and his to yank back. Those two claims cannot coexist. If mentality is the currency he's using, then dependence is the debt he's charging her. He's the one lending and the one collecting on both sides of the ledger. And Nevaeh, whether she can see it in real time or not, is the borrower every single time the ring light comes on. Now watch the sequence, because the sequence is a whole story on its own. December 2024. Blueface buys the 4-story house for Jaidyn. Publicly, on camera, with a broken elevator gag that XXL wrote up. Fast forward through 2025. The relationship with Jaidyn collapses. The alleged tape situation with Chrisean's brother detonates. Blueface ends the whole arc loudly on X. In the same window, whispers begin that Jaidyn's 4-story house was actually a rental, not a deed. The story goes murky quickly. Late 2025 into early 2026. Chrisean Rock's own housing situation destabilizes enough that she ends up couch surfing at LaMelo Ball's mansion with a baby on her hip. Then Nevaeh walks in. Gets pregnant. Becomes the girlfriend. And somewhere on that on-ramp, the shelter chapter of her life becomes water cooler content. And now, July 2026. The one man who has watched every single woman in his orbit navigate housing turbulence, some of it caused directly by him, sits on stream and lectures the entire internet about living conditions. Slow it down. Rewind. Look again. This part is the part. He's not just lecturing. He's using Jaidyn Alexis and Chrisean Rock, the mothers of his own children, as the negative example. And his current girlfriend, who literally slept in a shelter, is co-signing every syllable. Not a coincidence. I said I wouldn't lean on that phrase, so let me put it in plain English. The timing is engineered. This is a man who needs his current relationship to look like the winning relationship. And the fastest way to do that on stream is to rank the women in his life by square footage. Now pull the lens back another notch. Because the timeline gets uglier the wider you pull it. Rewind to 2023. The original Crazy in Love season, according to Zeus Network's own promotional material, was already leaning heavily on unstable housing storylines. Evictions. Motel stays. Sleeping in cars. That was the emotional engine of season 1, straight from the network's own episode descriptions. So when I say the same playbook, different woman, later in this breakdown, I mean it literally. Housing instability isn't a bug in this franchise. It's a feature. It's the recurring set piece. And every single woman who orbits Blueface eventually gets cast, whether they signed the paperwork or not, into a housing storyline the audience already knows how to root for and against. Now stack the legal timeline on top of it. Blueface legal saga. The 2023 arrest. The plea deal reporting through 2024. The intermittent probation adjacent headlines all through 2025. Every single one of those pressure points landed within weeks of a public housing controversy involving one of the women in his life. Reports from multiple outlets covering the case have noted that his availability for filming, streaming, and public appearances shifted in tandem with those legal windows. When his mobility narrowed, the women's storylines widened. When his mobility opened up again, he became the narrator. That's not a personality quirk. That's a production schedule. And there's a micro-timeline nobody's stitched together yet. Look at the 72 hours leading into the July 23 stream. Multiple aggregator accounts noted a spike in Nevaeh search traffic in the days before that broadcast, driven by a viral repost of her earlier clarification video. Which means the shelter conversation wasn't fresh news that afternoon. It was ripe. Everyone in that room knew the chat was going to bring it up. The only question was whether they'd have a line ready when it landed. Turns out they did. It was free. That is not the answer of someone caught off guard. That is the answer of someone who rehearsed it in the mirror the night before. Now zoom in on one sentence. Just one. Blueface said, quote, "If you live in an apartment there's no upkeep, all you have to do is clean the inside, there's no outside exterior." Close quote. Read it twice. That's not a housing take. That's a self-portrait. Because for a guy whose whole public identity is built on not doing the maintenance, not on the relationships, not on the co-parenting arrangements, not on the legal follow-through, not on the label paperwork, bragging about upkeep is wild. He's describing a life he intellectually respects but doesn't behaviorally live. And I want you to sit with that contradiction for a full second before we move on. Because the reason this monologue keeps hitting so many timelines isn't the offense. It's the mirror. Every viewer who has ever preached a value they don't live saw themselves in this footage the moment Blueface opened his mouth. That's why the clip is spreading. Now the second lens. The behavioral tick. Watch Nevaeh during that segment. She interrupts with, I want a smoothie. She pivots with, I'm going to dye my hair black tomorrow. She derails with, you're so cute, I hope you're having fun. Every single time the shelter topic drifts too close, Nevaeh reaches for something soft to change the room's temperature. That's not confidence. That's a woman surviving a monologue by making herself smaller and cuter until the segment ends. And if you have ever watched a woman shrink herself in real time to survive a room, you already know that reflex on sight. Third lens. Fast. The 304K versus 401K exchange. Blueface said it. Nevaeh laughed. The chat laughed. Buried inside a joke was the thing he actually believes. He retired her. He owns the retirement. He can unretire her whenever he wants. Quote. If y'all had a man that told y'all baby you don't need to work no more, y'all would shut up and sit down and do it, real talk. Close quote. That's not a love letter. That's a leash with a ribbon tied around it. Fourth lens. Because we're already under the microscope. The pronoun drift. Watch what Blueface does across the length of that monologue. He starts in the first person singular. I'm not hearing you. Then he shifts into a generic second person. You haven't figured out how to get out. Then he lands in a possessive first person plural. Our mindset. Our trajectory. That progression looks tiny on paper. It's enormous in practice. It's the linguistic move of a man who isn't describing his own life. He's drafting a value system and dragging the audience into it by pronoun. By the end of the segment, if you nodded along even once, you signed a lease on his worldview whether you meant to or not. That is a technique. That is not a slip. Streamers who deploy it well deploy it on purpose. Fifth lens. The silences. Rewatch the pauses. There are 3 moments in the segment, time-stamped by viewers on X, where Blueface stops mid-sentence and looks off camera. Each pause runs 1 to 2 seconds. Each one lands exactly before a name would have come out of his mouth. He never says Chrisean. He never says Jaidyn. He shapes every sentence around them, points at their apartments, but doesn't put their actual names in his mouth. That's legally aware restraint. Real spontaneous rants don't do that. Real spontaneous rants use names, because names are how humans think. What you're watching is a man who has been told, probably more than once, that naming names on stream costs money. Sixth lens. And this one is small but it eats me. The chair angle. Watch how Nevaeh's chair is positioned relative to his. She is not facing the chat. She is facing him. The whole segment, her body is angled inward at maybe 45 degrees. So the camera captures her reactions to his words instead of her reactions to the audience. That is the exact geometry of a co-host in a reality show interview booth. Not a girlfriend on a casual Tuesday broadcast. Coincidence? Maybe. Recurring? Every single time. Every clip of Nevaeh on his stream in the last 6 weeks has her in that same configuration. She's already blocking scenes. Seventh lens, because I want to give you the full ledger. The lighting. Somebody in the comments section is going to tell me lighting doesn't matter. It matters. Watch the ring light setup on Blueface rig across the last 3 months. It got upgraded. Twice. Once in May, once in early July. Each upgrade produced smoother, more broadcast-ready footage. Streamers don't spend money on ring lights the week before dropping an album. They spend money on ring lights the week before shopping a sizzle reel. Everything in that room is being lit for someone who isn't in the chat. Now, before we go into the media camp breakdown, I want to do the thing this channel does that other channels don't. I want to name the moment this whole story stopped being about drama and started being about a business plan. It happened around minute 11 of the July 23rd stream, according to viewers who tracked the transcript. Blueface, mid-sentence, glanced at his phone. Read something. Smiled. Then pivoted directly into the apartment monologue. Whatever was on that phone screen is the actual origin of this entire news cycle. And no, we don't know what it was. But we know when he looked. We know how long he looked. And we know the sermon started 38 seconds after his eyes came off it. Timing that clean isn't accidental in a room where everyone is being paid to make timing look accidental. Now watch how the different media camps framed the same 15 minutes. This is the part nobody's teaching you, and it's the most valuable education you'll get all week. The gossip first sites, the Hollywood unlocked orbit, the shade room orbit, mostly ran it as pure drama. Blueface drags exes. Nevaeh nods. Click here. Entertainment framing. The clip aggregators, the Lord have mercy TikTok reposters, the academics of the algorithm, they flipped the exact same footage into Blueface defends Nevaeh after chat came for her shelter passed. Same audio. Same visual. But suddenly he's the protector instead of the guy whose own logic just weaponized her. Watch that pivot. That's not editing. That's alignment marketing. Then the fan camp accounts, especially the one sympathetic to Chrisean Rock, ran it as, the hypocrite tax is due. They pulled the LaMelo Ball mansion clip. They pulled the December 2024 XXL house buying article. They pulled Nevaeh's own clarification video. They stacked them into a single carousel. Different rooms. Different spins. Now Steelman the loudest counter-argument, because I want to be fair. Somebody in the comments is typing right now, but he's telling the truth though, mindset shifts when you own versus rent, apartments are mental prisons, he's just being honest. Fine. There is a version of that argument that stands up straight. Housing stability affects psychology. That's not opinion. That's research. That part isn't wrong. But Blueface is wrong to be the messenger, because the preacher becomes the sermon. You cannot deliver a homily on housing while the choir behind you is a woman you scooped out of a shelter and the congregation is two mothers of your children whose living situations you personally influenced. The point crumbles under the weight of who's speaking it. And there's a fourth media camp nobody's naming yet. The industry insider accounts. The ones with three-letter handles and locked DMs. They ran the segment as tea, not drama. Zeus is spinning up. Watch the announcements. This is a promo, not a rant. Those accounts have been early on every previous Blueface project rollout for their entire posting histories. So when they call something a promo before the network confirms, they are usually right. Their framing didn't trend. The gossip framing trended. But if you're grading on accuracy instead of virality, the industry crew has the receipts on their side historically. And there's a fifth camp worth naming. The silent one. The mainstream music press. Complex. XXL, beyond the old 2024 house buying piece. Rolling Stone's hip-hop desk. Billboard. None of them touched the July 23 segment in real time. Zero coverage in the 24 hours after. That silence is its own story. Because when the mainstream music press stops covering an artist's drama and only the gossip and clip ecosystem carries it, that's the signal that the industry has quietly moved him from artist to personality. Different lane. Different economics. Different exit ramps. Add all 5 framings together and you get the truth. The exact same 15 minutes of footage were sold as drama to the fans, as protection to the girlfriend supporters, as hypocrisy to the ex's supporters, as a promotional trailer to the industry, and as absolutely nothing at all to the music press. 5 different products. 1 raw material. That's not media coverage. That's a distribution strategy operating either with a strategist or without one. Which one it is, I can't prove yet. But I can tell you which one I bet on. Here is the angle nobody's typing. This entire living conditions arc isn't really about Chrisean Rock. It isn't really about Jaidyn Alexis. And, honestly, it's barely even about Nevaeh. It's Zeus Network content prep. That's the whole game. Because Blueface said it on stream. Casually. Buried between roast bits. They are getting ready for the reality show. The next Crazy in Love. Reportedly Crazy in Love 3, with Nevaeh in the co-lead this time. Instagram, Lemmy, Zeus, he said it. Lemmy's teased it. The whole ecosystem is priming for it. So what does a reality show desperately need before it hits the air? A villain. A love interest. A redemption arc. A comeback narrative. And that apartment sermon hits every single one of those beats in a single afternoon. It villainizes the exes. It elevates Nevaeh as the chosen one. It sets up the shelter-to-mansion redemption arc for the girlfriend, which is a Zeus story Bible cliché at this point. That wasn't a rant. That was a trailer. Y'all remember what Zeus did with the original Crazy in Love. The way every fight, every eviction, every custody scare somehow ended up filmed for the next season. Same playbook. Different woman. Different apartment. And the sharpest jab I can throw at the whole operation is this. Blueface isn't judging Chrisean Rock and Jaidyn Alexis for their addresses. He's auditioning Nevaeh for hers. Every time Nevaeh agrees with him on stream, she is proving she is castable. Every time she says, "It was free," about the shelter, she is writing her own confessional booth intro for episode 1. Every time she says, "I don't live with my mama," she is clipping her own promo. Nevaeh isn't the girlfriend. She's the rehearsal. The unpaid audition. He needs a narrative for the show. She needed a house. They found each other at the exact right moment for the exact wrong reason. The absurd version. This is the first reality TV romance ever built inside a Twitch chat's tip goals. The almost sympathetic version. Maybe both of them genuinely believe they're in love and Zeus is going to monetize whatever's left of it either way. Pick whichever flavor sits down easier. They all end at the same cutting room floor. Here's the mechanic nobody outside the industry talks about. Reality show casting isn't a single audition anymore. Hasn't been since around 2019. According to multiple published accounts of how modern unscripted TV builds talent, it's a rolling audition that happens on the potential cast members' own socials months before contracts get signed. Producers scroll. They screenshot. They build sizzle reels out of your existing content. If you can already deliver a confessional booth-worthy line to a Twitch chat of 2,000 people, you can deliver it in a soundproof booth to a network audience of 2 million. That's the pipeline. And Nevaeh is running it flawlessly whether she can name what she's doing or not. It was free. I don't live with my mama. Those aren't off-the-cuff replies. Those are one-liners. And one-liners are what get you cast. There's also the incentive side of the equation. Networks in the Zeus tier operate on lean margins compared to traditional cable. According to public reporting on the streaming network economy, they need built-in audiences before they greenlight a season. Blueface brings a built-in audience. Nevaeh, on her own, doesn't yet. But Nevaeh, attached to Blueface, with a shelter-to-house redemption arc and a pregnancy storyline running simultaneously, that becomes a budget approval package. 2 seasons of story preloaded. A villain slot open for whichever X is available to spar that quarter. A finale set piece ready-made, either a wedding, a breakup, or a housewarming. And honestly, whichever one it turns out to be, they will film it. Now, the part that makes me tap the desk. This exact template has already run twice. The original Crazy in Love with Chrisean Rock was manufactured out of the same raw material. A viral relationship. A housing arc. A pregnancy. A chorus of exes providing conflict. Baddies South. Bad Girls Club. Same DNA. Different network. Different decade. Zeus didn't invent the format. Zeus just refined the speed at which the format goes from Twitch to broadcast. The turnaround used to be 12 months. Now it's closer to 4. And July 23rd to a hypothetical November premiere, that is the 4-month math playing out in real time. Which brings us to the receipt I can't put in the reference list yet, because it isn't official. The casting call. If Crazy in Love 3 is real, there will be a casting notice, either internal or leaked, within the next 2 to 8 weeks. Watch for it. That is the moment the trailer theory stops being theory and starts being a leak. And before we go into the 6-path prediction stack, let me name one more piece of the mechanic that most people miss. The pregnancy timing. Nevaeh is roughly 8 months along, according to public information she has shared herself. That means a delivery window that lands squarely inside the promotional runway of a November premiere. A newborn is a story arc. A newborn is a season finale wrapped in a bow. And whichever hospital scene, homecoming scene, or first week of life scene ends up on somebody's phone will end up in the promotional cut too. That's not cynicism. That's how these formats work. That's the tape. Now watch how this plays out. I'll tell you what I'm expecting and you can screenshot this and drag me later if I miss. The path most likely to land. Crazy in Love 3 gets officially announced within the next 60 days. Zeus rolls out a trailer that leans hard into the shelter-to-house arc for Nevaeh because that story sells. The apartment sermon clip from July 23 gets recut as a Nevaeh promo, not a Blueface promo. And Jaidyn Alexis and Chrisean Rock will each get their own reactionary content cycles that same week whether they want them or not. Don't be shocked when both of them post their own housing content within a month. A tour. A walkthrough. A "look what I bought myself" video. That's the counter move, and it writes itself. The path that flips the table. Nevaeh's shelter chapter gets weaponized against her instead of for her. If a former shelter roommate, a caseworker, or an old friend surfaces with even one clip, one screenshot, one document, the redemption arc becomes a receipts arc, and Zeus has to scramble the edit. And it wouldn't be the first time a reality TV origin story got rewritten in real time. Watch Nevaeh's socials get quieter over the next few weeks. That'll be the tell. Add a fourth path, because forecasting only works if you name the outliers too. The silent pivot. There is a version of this in which Blueface, after watching this clip cycle burn hotter than he wanted, quietly deletes the VOD, mutes the topic for a full week, and pivots his entire stream schedule to music-first content. Album talk. Studio clips. Cypher freestyles. That is the exact move a manager would recommend if the analytics came back sour. Watch for it. If his next 3 streams are conspicuously drama-free, that means somebody in his ear pulled the emergency brake and the Zeus rollout got pushed to Q1 of 2027. Networks don't announce delays. They just go quiet. And Blueface socials would go quiet right along with them. Add a fifth path. The legal wall. If any of the housing claims in the July 23 monologue prompted a defamation-adjacent letter from either Jaidyn Alexis's or Chrisean Rock's camp, this whole storyline collapses into a legal chill. Not because the letter would necessarily prevail. But because streamers, when they see cease and desist paperwork, tend to overcorrect. He'd stop naming apartments. He'd stop framing exes. The sermon would evaporate and the show would either quietly recast the villain slot or delay entirely. That's not a wild scenario. That's how a lot of these micro-feuds actually end. Off camera. In inboxes nobody reads. And a sixth, because you deserve the full ledger. The Nevaeh exit. If Nevaeh at any point in the next 90 days distances herself from the sermon in her own words on her own platform without Blueface in the frame, then the entire trailer theory blows apart. Because a co-star who refuses the audition isn't a co-star anymore. She becomes a plot obstacle. And Zeus does not cast plot obstacles. They edit around them. If you see a solo Nevaeh Instagram live in which she gently walks back the apartment mentality framing, screenshot it immediately. That is the moment the rehearsal gets rewritten mid-flight. And one last path, because 6 is not enough for a story with this many moving parts. The seventh path. The Chrisean Rock counter-launch. Chrisean has a footprint that neither Nevaeh nor Jaidyn currently matches, according to her own social metrics. If Chrisean chooses this moment to drop her own project, whether that's a solo reality vehicle, an album rollout, or a documentary about her housing turbulence framed as ownership instead of victimhood, she doesn't just deflect the sermon. She swallows it. She becomes the story the algorithm hunts for the rest of the year. Watch Chrisean's posting cadence over the next 3 weeks. If it accelerates, we've got a new lead in this race. If it goes quiet, she's letting Blueface bury himself and moving in slow-mo behind him. Both moves are legitimate. Both moves change the outcome. Now stack all 7 paths in the order of likelihood based on how these rollouts historically move. Announcement first. Reactionary content second. Chrisean counterlaunch third. Silent pivot fourth. Redemption arc scramble fifth. Legal chill 6th. Co-star exit 7th. The top 2 are near certain. The middle 3 are coin flips. The bottom 2 are outliers. But every single one of them is on the board. And the beautiful, terrible thing about this ecosystem is that we're going to know which one landed within about 8 weeks. Screenshot this section. Come back to it. Tell me I was wrong on the specifics if I was. That's the deal. And there's one final observation I want to leave you with before we get to the kids, because it might be the truest thing in this entire breakdown. Every one of the paths I just walked you through, every one of them, ends with content. Not with resolution. Not with justice. Not with peace. Content. Announcement content. Counter content. Silence content. Legal drama content. Exit content. There is no path in this ecosystem in which the participants get to walk off the field. The field is the ecosystem. The exits have all been paved over with cameras. And that's not just a Blueface problem. That's a Zeus problem. That's a streamer network era problem. That's the whole model. And the last piece of forward motion, because we owe the kids at least this much. Every single one of these 7 paths ends with 3 children eventually opening a search engine. There is no version where that doesn't happen. The only variable is what they find on page 1. Right now, on July 26, 2026, page 1 is the apartment sermon. 2 weeks from now, page 1 might be a trailer. 6 months from now, page 1 might be an apology tour. 5 years from now, page 1 is whatever the algorithm decides is still relevant. And algorithms, if you've been paying attention, tend to keep the loudest content on top. And the loudest content, as of this recording, is a man ranking the mothers of his children on a Tuesday afternoon Twitch broadcast. That's the archive. That's what stays. Blueface Jr. will grow up. Callie will grow up. The child Nevaeh is carrying right now will grow up. And every one of them will type a name they didn't choose into a search bar and receive an inheritance they didn't sign for. That inheritance is a monologue about apartments delivered next to a woman who slept in a shelter. That inheritance is a father who preached about mentality while ranking their mothers by zip code. That inheritance is a Tuesday afternoon in the summer of 2026 that nobody in the room had the courage to stop. And that is the receipt none of us in the audience get to erase either. Because we watched. We clipped. We shared. We laughed. We commented. We built the algorithmic staircase that keeps that footage on page 1. So whatever we say about Blueface in this breakdown, we have to say about ourselves in the same breath. He built the sermon. The internet built the pulpit. The kids will inherit the church. Anyway, that's my read. A real estate homily delivered from a motel prayer bench. That's the whole thing in one sentence. If you rocked with this breakdown, do the usual. Like, subscribe, tap the bell, and drop your honest take in the comments, because I want the fight. Y'all know this channel runs on real ones talking back. I'm reading every single comment on this one personally. Tell me which of the 7 paths you're betting on. Tell me which lens hit hardest. Tell me if I missed one. And if you disagree with any part of this read, come argue for it, because that's how this show gets sharper. Next chapter's already queued up. And you are not going to want to miss where this Zeus rollout goes next. Catch y'all in the next one.